Welcome back to Al's Geek Lab, thanks for joining me. Now today I was supposed to do a video on this thing right here. It's called a parity error, and it's basically a memory upgrade board for the Intel inboard 386, which I showed you on a previous video. Check the link out for that in the description. Now, I can't show a video for it today because unfortunately in delivery from the United States, one of the pins that connects to said inboard snapped off, which is not optimal. So whilst I figure out a way to reattach said pin or redo the connector board, that video is on pause. I'll get to it as soon as I possibly can. For today, I thought, well, let's do something else. And that something else is just a little pet project thing I'm doing, which is to multitask with this machine behind me. Now that I've got that inboard, I can basically multitask pretty well. It would be even better if I had this memory card. Nevertheless, I can still do what I want to do, which is run, say, Telnet in one screen and run maybe another Telnet session in another screen, or maybe completely different, like a micro web browser. So I can have 2 or 3 different applications sitting there doing stuff around at the same time. So basically all TCP applications, and they're all using sort of the Michael Brookman TCP stack. Now that works perfectly, but it's a pain in the butt to do it because you have to tell MTCP the new packet driver interrupt every time. If you haven't seen my video on multiplexing TCP drivers, check on that video, which is also in the description. So if you want to get multiple applications all running at the same time, you need this packet multiplexer. And the packet driver multiplexer happens, you have to have it running on a separate interrupt number every single time. So for example, I start out on packet interrupt 60, and then the next application could be 61 and 62 and so on, right? But to do that, I have to edit mtcp.cfg and then run the packet driver to intercept 61, 62, 63. So editing that text file, updating the config bit is a bit of a hassle. So I thought, why don't I automate that process? And what better to do it in than good old trusty QuickBasic 4.5. You heard me right, QuickBasic. So I'm going to show you a quick video of what I'm doing and how we used to develop in QuickBasic. Because QBasic, or QuickBasic as it became, is a really simple language which, if you're just wanting to do sort of rudimentary tasks, it's really quite useful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write the code for this, and I'm going to show you a bit of coding in real time, I guess. And then I'm going to open source the software. I'm just going to give away the source code, the QuickBasic source code. I'm going to stick it up on my GitHub, and I'm going to make the exe file and show how it all works. So stay with me for that. I'm not going to show you the whole development process because obviously that would take ages and I would lose my marbles. But you know, I'll show you the general gist of how QuickBasic development is done. That's all coming up here on Al's Geek Lab.
This video is sponsored by the very wonderful people at PCBWay. PCBWay are the leading electronics and prototyping manufacturer. If you've got an idea, you can use PCBWay to turn it into a reality. PCBWay can build PCBs from just $5 and build them for you in around 24 hours. Now, what I really love is that for people that suck at using a soldering iron, like myself, you can upload your PCB file and have PCBWay assemble it all for you. PCBWay also do 3D printing, CNC machining, sheet metal fabrication, injection molding, and so much more. So if you've got an idea for an electronics project, why don't you give PCBWay a try at PCBWay.com? After all, that is the PCB way. We thank PCBWay for sponsoring Al's Geek Lab. Now, let's get back to the video.
So today is a bit of a strange setup. I am using my mobile phone to record myself whilst recording the screen. So if it's a bit strange, that's why. Right, now, so if I go into the QBasic folder, the QB45, and you start it up with QB. So QuickBasic has been around since, I don't know, probably 1988 as per the copyright information here. And it's got a lovely survival guide. It helps you understand how to use QuickBasic, all that good stuff. And the online help is actually helpful, which is unusual for, well, most applications, to be honest with you. It's got an index where you can go in and you can go through each of the various commands in QuickBasic, sort of alphabetically, which is cool. And it's also got a contents, which basically is effectively the whole manual online. So I really like that about the QuickBasic manual. So QuickBasic started off as QBasic, which was released as a freebie, basically, along with MS-DOS 5 and up. And so yeah, you'd always get QBasic with free with DOS. Before then, it was called GW Basic. Didn't have this nice sort of text user interface or TUI. So yeah, this was a real increase in capability from those earlier versions. It did away with line numbering, for example. You can still do print hello, for example, and 20 go to 10. That will still work. So you could import most of your old programs, but you didn't have to do that. You could just say, I think hello, if I go like this, and then 20. I could do away with the 20 in here and just go to hello. Got to put in world there. Shift F5, and you can see the program works in exactly the same way. So introduce labels. Where QuickBasic happened, it's QuickBasic, I think, was version 4.5. They decided to start QuickBasic at version 4.5, if I'm not mistaken. There was a version 7.1 or PDS, which was the Professional Development Suite. And again, that was just before Microsoft released Visual Basic. So there was quite a difference in the two applications. So QuickBasic was this version was the product that you actually bought from Microsoft, not the freebie that came with DOS. This was a fully fledged integrated development environment, IDE. So you could do a lot more, and crucially, what you could do was make an exe file. So you could compile your basic program to run at the DOS prompt. I guess there was two main advantages of that. One, the application ran faster, right? It ran kind of natively because it was all compiled. You didn't have to interpret each line by line. It was almost like you had a C compiler, but for BASIC. And of course, the second benefit is that you didn't get the source code. So you could kind of copy protect it from the people that you were sending it to. Otherwise, before, I saw in the early days of the PC, a lot of applications just had the GW Basic or basica.com or exe files there, and you would write a batch file which invoked GW Basic and then the name of the .bas file. So basically people could just press Control Break or Control C, log into your source code and view your entire source code. This has the benefit of making completely isolated separate exe files. So that's a little bit about QuickBasic. Now, I think what I did is I defined the issue that I'm having somewhat archaically at the beginning of this video, but it's easier to show rather than tell sometimes. So basically the idea with this application is I want to make a configuration wizard for MTCP. Basically what it will do is it will read in your statements, your MTCP config file, I should say, and it will then allow you to rapidly change those settings and update the config file. So what I've done so far is I have done this box. It looks like I've done nothing. There's a few extra things that it does so far. Let's have a look quickly at the source code as to how I've written it so far. One thing that it does very well in QuickBasic, but probably does as well in QBasic, is the functionality of subroutines or functions. Now, this is a sort of capability which was probably predominantly in the more advanced programming languages. So for example, C or Pascal even had functions. So basically, you don't want to mess up your entire code, one big massive spaghetti bit of code. You could chop it down into simple, distinct functions. Well, that was the definition of the declare sub job. So declare sub makes it a subroutine. A subroutine is just another word for a function. So if you hit the F2 button, up it would come and show you your defined subroutines. So for example, I want to draw a box. I decided that I would write the code here in a nice little subroutine that got out of the way. And so anytime I want to call that functionality, I would just type in the word draw box and then the parameters of the size of the box. So it would take those parameters and you could make a smaller box or a bigger box depending on your requirements every single time. And then, yeah, so I've done that. That draws that box that you see at the beginning. Then I do a keep text within the Windows side. So basically, I don't want any text on line 1 on line 2, and I want it in between 22. So basically, if I look at this here, line 23 is the line at the bottom there that has that box on it. So I don't want text printing on that. So I basically made a view window for all of the text that comes after I print that box. That's what that is. Then I've got that line 1 which says here's a config wizard, but I can already see an optimization there. Let's put that in, I'll cut that there. So that's the Alt-E key, and I will put that in while I do this, paste, and now what I'll do is I'll change this to line 2. So any text that it prints after that is only going to print within line 2 or 22. It's not going to go in line 1 or line 23. So just make sure that the output of the text is nice and tidy. What I've also done is I've assumed at the moment in a string here that mtcp's CFG file is in this directory. What I'm going to do is update this code before I release it. So I'm going to release this code open source so anybody can download it from my GitHub and play about with the source code, or they can download the pre-made exe file. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this user definable so you can choose where your mtcp config file is. So what it does next is it opens the file up and then has a look, and as it starts up a loop here, do while not end of file, and the file handle is 1. So this is very similar to other software development applications. You always define a file handle and you can call it usually whatever you like. So if you're a Python editor, you would just define it as like FH or something like that. You call it whatever you want. This one in QuickBasic, you kind of have to do it as a number, and it's quite strange that way, I guess. But so there you have defined it as file handle 1, and then we're dealing with it as just number 1 in brackets there. So what I'm doing here is I'm saying every single line inside that file handle, I'm going to name it line text because it makes more sense to call it line text. And then so now all the operations that I perform on that file are just called line text. So the first thing I want to know from this file is first of all, if I have a look at it, so if I go into C:\net. By the way, I'm doing this on the real hardware here. I don't know if you can hear the clicky keys. It's pretty out there, but it's great to be coding on the actual bare metal. So if I go star dot, I'm just going to save this actually for a second before I go off and mess anything up. C:\net/mtcp /star.cfg. So if we open this up, I know it's a text file and it shouldn't really be opened up in BASIC because we don't want it to be updated by QBasic. I won't save it. But if we have a look at the things inside Michael Brookman's config, you can see that the first thing that it defines is the packet interrupt. So the packet interrupt is 65 in this case. Probably with you it'll be 60, but whatever it is, what my software does here is it looks for that line and says if it says packet int,
and then it has a value after it, that is what we need to know for the packet interrupt. Likewise, it's going to go through and it's going to search for the maximum transmission unit, and it's going to look for your host name. It's going to look for all sorts of things like that, right? So it looks like this file has been clobbered already, which is not helpful. But anyway, it's got all these details in there. That's fine. Now, what I want to do is go back in and edit my file and have a look for that. And I just want to demonstrate to you what it does at the moment. So what we have here is when I'm saying the first thing I want to find is the interrupt number. So as I said before, that was, or showed you before, it's called packet int. And so I'm saying if the instruction is set to lowercase, so if in string, if this text is found inside the string, first of all, I'm going to lowercase all the text from this line in line text and look for the word packet interrupt. So if the text packet int is found inside the text, then find out where that 0x is. Because if you remember, the next thing that came after packet int, yeah, that bit of text there was a space, and then it was 0x, and then 65 in the case of that config file. So I'm going to look for that x for 0x, and then basically that number straight after that is the position, is the interrupt number. So in this case, it would be 65. So if I now go and uncomment this line here, a comment can be, it used to be just rem for remark, but in QuickBasic they updated that and allowed remark, rem, or this this quote, single quote. If I uncomment that, it should show me now that the interrupt is 65. It's found that text inside, it's cut out all the other stuff like packet int 0x and just given me that number 65. So that's just in there for debugging, but now it has stored the packet interrupt in this variable string called int $. And basically I'm doing the same for the host name, if that's defined, and the MTU as well, and so forth. It's going to go through each one of those variables and it's going to define those. So once I've finished with all of those, I will then report them back to the user in a fairly straightforward, simple way, and allow the end user to change any of those settings just like a normal software wizard, you know, in modern software terminology would do. Then this gives the benefit to the user if they're chopping and changing between the multiplex driver, they can do that very quickly. They don't have to go into the edit command and edit the text file and then come out of the text file and then update and then rerun the driver and all the rest. It's just done for them very quickly. So that's basically the idea behind this piece of software. So I'm going to finish off this bit and I'm going to come back to you and show you what I've done. So stay tuned. Okay, so I've made some improvements to the code, still heavily under development, of course, so go easy on me. It's a work in progress, but I just thought this is a nice example of how coding in BASIC is a lot of fun, and it can still be relatively useful as long as you're not coding for speed, especially on bare metal, on the real thing. So as you can see, the code is still on bare metal, and what I've done is I'm in the middle of defining all of the things to search for. So for example, in MTCP config file, which I've downloaded onto my modern PC to take a look through, there is things like IRC Junior and the FTP server and telnet options and a DHCP bot settings as well. So what I've done is I've put the expected default values for all of those in there. And so eventually this piece of code will look at every single potential option inside the code, or inside the config file, I should say, so that you can define any of those settings. And I think the most popular defined settings will be on page 1
of the program, and then there'll be more advanced settings or other settings on page 2 and maybe page 3 as necessary. But so far it doesn't look like it does very much. So for example, there you can see that I want to find out what the config file holds in it as lease requests. So the value is 14,400. I also send the subroutine, which I've made 14,400 as a default value. So if it can't find the value, the expected default is 14,400. I'll show you how that works. So as I showed you earlier, you can define subroutines or functions by pressing declaring them first. Sub search var is the name of this new subroutine. It takes the input string of the current line of the file, line text, shortened to LT, as the string, the search term as a string, the default value is a string, and basically that's all worked down here. So I made some manual efforts of these kind of this thing up here, and they're slightly nuanced strings as well, so I'm going to leave those as is for now until I can get a bit better at this. But you can see there I have search var, and so what that will do is it will pass the current line of text inside the file and then search it for this particular string, DHCP lease request seconds, and there's the default value, which if you don't have it set in the MTCP CFG will be 14,400. So we can use that if necessary, if there's no defined value found in the file. And then also the comeback string, which is result. Okay, so that will be provided by the subroutine when it finds the value or when it makes a value. So far, this is not a finalized subroutine, but once the subroutine exits, it comes back and puts the result for this particular string or this particular request into a new variable called DHCP leased RQ6. Bit of a long variable name, but it's very descriptive, and I'll need it to be descriptive to remind me what I'm actually doing. So if I have a look at that subroutine, you can see this new subroutine which I've made called search var. And if I have a look in here, there's some nasty debugging which I can now take out. I think I'm quite happy that these are being fed from the main routine. So what it does is it goes, right, let's have a look at the line of text that's been sent through. So LT has become a line of text within this subroutine. I could have just left it as LT, but I thought, well, best to keep things straight in my head here. So line of text, if the first character starts with a hash or a pound symbol or whatever you call it wherever you're from, that means it's a comment. So we'll just ignore it. So I've just got a couple of rem statements in there just to point that out. Otherwise, what it will do is it will go on to this bit of code. It will search in the string, lowercase it, and look in the line of text for the search text. So in this case, it's the DHCP one that's being sent, and then it will add a space on the end of that. So it needs to match the piece of text. So DHCP lease underscore whatever, then always there should be a space after it. So if it doesn't have that exact thing, then it could be something else. Could be misinterpreted text. So we're just going to always assume that the configuration option, whatever it is, it's FTP, user password, or DHCP, or whatever it may be, will always have the term, such as that, and then a space, and then the argument. So for example, 14,400. And so then what we do is we then lowercase the entire text, and then we have a look at the position inside that text for a space, which we know is already definitely in that text, because after that space is going to be the value which we want to obtain. So we have a look and we can find that the value found is then placed into this new variable called found term, and which is it extracts the current bit of the text into +1 position from that position of the space back into that variable. So it will give us just the returning attribute of the configuration item. That makes sense? So if it's DHCP, lease, request, timeout, blah, blah, blah,
and the value is 1400, then all it will return is the 1400. So that's how that works there. So we go back into our code. You can see that in action when I hit F5, DHCP lease request seconds. So what's another one? DHCP lease threshold is another one, and we expect that to be 3600. So let's do the same thing as we did here, but this time let's do it for lease threshold. And I always forget these terms under it's Alt, it's Shift Delete to cut and Shift Insert to paste. It's hard getting around these old conventions. So we're looking now for lease threshold. And we want 3600 seconds as the recommended default within the configuration documentation by Michael Brookman. And so what that's going to do is it's going to find that text DHCP lease threshold inside the text file, and it's going to result it back to the result $. Now what I'll do then is I'll put it in a variable, and I'll call that DHCP lease threshold $, which means it's a string variable, and I'm going to put the I'm just going to put result $, in there. So let's have a look now. It will do exactly the same thing because I've not told it to print. So if we go down here and we go print DHCP, I'm going to take away all of this at the end. This is just for debugging. Lease, what was it? Forgetting already. Lease threshold $. DHCP lease threshold $. All right, so now, oh, wrong way around. I'm used to variables with a $, at the start. And you know, this is one of the things when you're coding in BASIC, you have to remember things the other way around. All right, let's have a look and see if that works. So it found the request seconds 3600. I think that's because of the way I've written the subroutine. So I need to go and fix that. So basically it's overwritten the last result. Not to worry, I'll figure that one out. But there you go. Shows you just how, you know, interesting, how good fun, and still, if you're wanting to make a utility in QBasic or QuickBasic, it is definitely doable. Obviously, your application of what it might be for is somewhat limited to, you know, DOS applications, but there is a QuickBasic-like environment called, I think it's called QB45. So if you wanted to develop applications in QuickBasic 4.5 syntax, you can do it on a modern machine. And what that means is you can actually compile a perfectly good application that runs uses the code of QuickBasic, but ultimately is running on a modern machine. So you get a binary which is compiled that runs on a Mac, a Linux box, and Windows. So you can have the fun of writing code on a modern environment with, I think it's called QB45. I'll post the link to that particular software in the description below. Anyway, look, this is just a short video to talk about how today's video with the parity error has gone wrong. So this is a little insight into stuff that I'm basically doing, and I thought, why don't bring you along for the journey? So that's what I'm doing for the community. And of course, when I do finally release the source code and the application, I will post that up on my socials. So don't forget to check those out. Al's Geek Lab on Twitter or X or whatever people are calling it these days. It's also on alsgeeklab.com on the web. You can check me out on Facebook, Instagram, although I don't post very often there, and of course the YouTube communities as well as some other places. So
check me out, and I'll be in touch, and hopefully next video I will be showing off this parity error thing and seeing what that does. But as you can see, I have Desk View open here, and I can swap between applications. It just takes a while, and the hard drive, you can't see it right now, but it's furiously moving about. So we can see running an application here. I'm just running dir, it's going through the entire hard drive. Now I switch windows, I can go to my first QuickBasic window, and things will happen. There you go. So in the background, it's still kind of able to know that there's two applications open. It will do that. The whole point of it though is that when it has more memory, it doesn't need to do that swapping, and the tasks can go at the same time properly. So that's just a thing to look forward to in an upcoming video. Anyway, the last thing I'll say is, if you like the stuff that I do, please check out the Patreon. Patreon.com/AlsGeekLab. First of all, it's a great way to support me in buying cards like this one, the Intel Inboard that I bought the other week, and all the other stuff that I buy that helps make content for this channel. So please support the channel, that would be great. I definitely did use the proceeds of the Patreon support to purchase these things and make videos from. It's all going back into the channel. And secondly, it's a good opportunity to get yourself some exclusive content, and of course your name up in lights, like all the people that are scrolling by you right now. These people are dedicated Patreon supporters to the channel. So that name, that URL again is patreon.com/AlsGeekLab. I want to thank you very much for watching, and let's hear your comments below about your fun with QuickBasic coding, and yeah, love to hear from you. As usual, take care and be excellent to each other. Bye for now.